Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome everyone. Today we're going to be talking about the Bully of Skidmore, Part 4. This is the story of Ken Rex McElroy. When we last left off, we had talked about Ken McElroy and his many relationships that he had had over the years. Not to mention that they were all minors, and I really, to this day, even though it was back during the 60s, I still find it so hard to believe that he was able to molest these children, groom them, and sexually assault them without getting any kind of charge. And this would proceed through most of his life. Another thing you want to kind of keep in mind, if you've noticed, he never ever was in a specific relationship with one person. He almost seemed polyamorous because he was always dating a girl while being married to another girl, while also entertaining multiple women, not being very true to any of these women he was seeing. And when he got with Alice, we learned that the relationship that she had envisioned between her and Ken McElroy was not the relationship that would happen in reality. And eventually Ken McElroy and Alice would actually move from St. Joseph, where she was originally from, and move in with his mother Mabel in Skidmore on the farm. And during this time, Ken McElroy would continue his treatment of Alice as he had done every single woman he had been with. And on multiple occasions, his mother Mabel would correct him and tell him that he shouldn't be like that or treat his girlfriend like that. And whenever his mother Mabel would correct him, Ken McElroy would quote unquote punish Alice for running her mouth to his mother about their personal affairs. And just like before, when he was seeing other women while he was with another woman, this would be no different when he was living in Skidmore. It is at this time that he started seeing Trina McLeod. And I could not find a picture of Trina McLeod around the time that he had met her. But Trina McLeod was the stepdaughter of a former hunting friend of Ken McElroy. And might I also add, when he had met Trina McLeod, she was only 12 years old, leaving her to be the youngest girl that he had basically groomed out of all the women that he had met over the years. During their relationship, multiple people would approach Ronnie, the stepfather of Trina McLeod, and tell them about the relationship between Trina and Ken McElroy. But Ronnie would always kind of play it off that it wasn't like that, that he was a close friend of the family, and that by no means was anything going on between Ken McElroy and his 12-year-old stepdaughter. And it wasn't until the school started becoming very visibly uncomfortable about the relationship between the two. The school would actually make multiple claims that Ken McElroy would get in his pickup truck and drive over to the school, to where he would not only pick up Trina McLeod at school, but would also drop her off at school as well. So he was not only taking her to school, but taking her home. And when he would take her home after school, he would do as he did before with multiple other women. He would drive them around and would take them place to place, buy them whatever they want, and within a certain time begin sexually assaulting these girls. And as I had said before, even the school would even contact Ronnie about these claims, and Ronnie again would just kind of play it off and say, you know, that's not what's going on. The school would even contact Trina McLeod's uncle, who was a deputy sheriff in another neighboring town, and eventually he would do some investigation and find out that the relationship between Ken McElroy and Trina McLeod was not a very platonic one, and that it had actually been grown and groomed into a sexual relationship. And upon hearing about this, Ronnie was very disturbed by these allegations, and at which point he had began to confront Ken McElroy about him sexually assaulting his stepdaughter. And he would tell Ken McElroy that he would not allow him to date his stepdaughter because of her age, and that he needed to leave her alone. And Ken McElroy's way of convincing Ronnie to allow the relationship and union to continue is he would try to convince Ronnie. And how he would convince Ronnie is on one particular night, he would take his shotgun, shoot the family dog, and burn the house down. And after he had done this, Ronnie would begrudgingly allow the relationship between Trina and Ken McElroy to continue. Trina McLeod would also say later that from the very beginning, the relationship was very toxic. And I'm not sure why, but on multiple nights, it would almost seem that Trina McLeod would come home after being dropped off by Ken McElroy and would be in tears from either things he would say or him sexually assaulting or raping Trina McLeod. And she would just cry and go running to her stepfather, Ronnie. But by the next day, she would eventually just drop in the car or truck that Ken McElroy picked up on and hop in. And it would just be a very repetitive thing back and forth. And by the time Trina McLeod was in 8th grade, she was about 14 years old. She would actually drop out because Ken McElroy would actually get her pregnant. And when she dropped out of 8th grade, she would actually then move in with Ken McElroy and Alice. Now, around the time that Ken McElroy had moved in Trina McLeod to the farm that he lived in with his mother with Alice, 10 months prior to this, Alice would actually leave Ken McElroy after being tired of years of abuse and was completely done at this point. And there she would actually move in with her parents in St. Joseph's. On the night that she had went home to her parents, her stepfather, Othea, would actually be at the door because Ken McElroy had actually followed Alice all the way home. And he would brandish a gun and tell her that she needed to come outside and come home. To which Othea would tell Ken McElroy she had a gun and was not going outside whatsoever. So Ken McElroy, as a way of convincing her to come outside, would look through the window and pull up his gun and actually aim and shoot Othea, her stepfather, in the leg. At this point, Alice and Othea would start by pressing charges against Ken McElroy. And Ken McElroy, trying to get out of the charges, would begin threatening and stalking Alice and her family. On many, many nights, he would be caught parking his truck outside their house with the lights on. And whenever they would pull the curtain back to look and see who it was, they would see Ken McElroy, and he would actually take his shotgun off the gun rack and show it to them in his truck. And sometimes he would actually point the gun upwards in the sky and shoot it as a warning shot, letting them know that he was threatening them with their lives. Another thing that Ken McElroy would do is he would always call the house of Alice and Othea. But he was more so threatening Othea more than Alice, and would call and actually threaten Othea that if he did not drop the charges, he would kill him. And on one particular night, Othea would actually go to a tavern to have a few drinks. And almost immediately after entering the tavern, Ken McElroy would actually come into the tavern and show him a knife and would tell him, "I'm going to kill you if you do not drop the charges." But Othea stood his ground and would say he was not going to sit there and stop. And at this point, Ken McElroy would leave. But he would return a few moments later, locking the tavern door and approaching Othea with a shotgun and telling him, "I am going to kill you if you do not drop the charges." He would even go and make a warning shot, scaring everybody in the tavern.